Support the Amigos podcast and keep the Amiga goodness flowing for just $1 a month. Visit our page at patreon.com/AmigosPodcast.
Amiga, the first personal computer that gives you a creative edge.
Amigos, the podcast about everything Amiga. Amigos is a proud member of the Throwback Network, your home for quality retro podcasts. And now, here are your hosts, Aaron Dowdy and John Bodovkar Schaller.
Hi everybody, welcome to Amigos. I'm John.
And I'm Aaron.
And today we're going to talk about Rainbow Islands.
Ooh.
But before we do, we have some feedback I'd like to share with you. Aaron, on the last Amigos podcast, you said you had not seen many Amiga demos.
I've seen some, but not many. There are many.
So Flack, our friend Rob O'Hara, wrote in saying if you'd like a great introduction to them, check out Mind Candy Volume 2. So these guys, the Mind Candy crew, they actually put Amiga demos onto, I guess, VHS tape of originally, and then they started putting them out on DVDs. But now they're out of print, and you can actually go and download the DVD ISOs directly from the Mind Candy site.
Oh boy! And
so it's mindcandydvd.com. And so we'll have to check some of those out. Maybe we'll watch some and do some commentary.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I'll Mr. Son's Theater of Demos.
Right.
I like it.
And then he also said to piggyback on the suck conversation, and that's SEUCK. The community is alive and well, and he shared with us the same link that we got last week about the SECUK vault. But there's also another link to the 2016, I guess maybe like the best of 2016 SEUCK games, and that's located at tnd64.unicat.sk. So we will share that link on the blog. So we'll check out some of those shoot 'em up construction kit games. So we thank you, Rob, for writing in.
Yeah, thanks, Flag.
And this next little bit I've got is not directly related to something new, but it is a little bit. You know, these days VR is all the rage.
Yes, my brother's going bananas for it right now.
Yeah, show sponsor Brent Dowdy also is bankrolling several VR companies with his purchases.
Yes.
But did you know that the Amiga 3000 had a prominent place in the history of virtual reality?
I had no idea.
So there was a company called Virtuality that came out. Actually, it was W Industries, and they put out this machine called Virtuality Machine, and these were either sit up or sit down, or stand up or sit down units, and they were the first sort of mass produced for consumer virtual reality gaming systems.
That rings a bell with me. Where would you obtain something?
Well, I think that they were commonly found in some of the larger arcades like Dave and Buster's or something like that.
I think I may have used one of those.
And the most famous one of these, I think there were several games available, but the most famous was called Dactyl Nightmare, and it was sort of a Turok type game where you were hunting dinosaurs. And the resolution on these screens, massive, 276 by 372 per eye.
Wow.
And the way that it worked is, obviously they didn't have the technology to put the small LCDs in front of you, so they somehow were able to use prisms and shoot this light coming from the monitors, into the headset. Basically you were tethered to the ceiling by this thing, so you could walk around a circle, and you were holding this sort of a two-handed sword, if you can think about like a katana grip or something like that.
Right.
Your space was calculated by where you were holding this stick. And that's where the Amiga comes in. So, of course, a lot of the graphic displays were custom chips, but they were using an Amiga 3000 to track your movement within this 3D space.
Huh. That's crazy. What year was this stuff out? Was it during the Amiga's production or well after?
1991. So it was right. I mean,
right in the wheelhouse.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, and so It said this is all from a link from a site called vrexperience.net, and somebody wrote up this. I didn't put their name in, but we'll link to it on the podcast. But he said that the Amiga 3000 was built into a large box with 2 DVI graphics cards to drive the head unit, and a circuit board on top to read the sensors in the ring and the helmet. And so, but inside of all the custom chips and everything inside was a stock Amiga 3000. So that's something that a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
You know.
So we could save Brent a lot of money. He could just go. He could go and buy himself an Amiga 3000. He could probably get a whole Virtuosity kit for what he's paid for what he's buying now.
Absolutely. So I just thought I'd throw that little tidbit out now that VR is the new hotness out there.
Very interesting, Bud.
What do you have for news this week, Aaron?
Just a couple items. I came across an article from a place called Polygon.com.
I'm well.
And it was all about a new game that's went up on Steam. It's called 1993 Space Machine. Did you read about this?
Not heard of it.
This is a game that was originally developed on an Amiga in 1993 by 4 Swedish teenagers, and they pretty much had the game almost finished. Then they had a sort of a love. One of the developers fell in love with the other. There was a big throwdown, and the group just sort of went their separate ways. And the game just laid. It laid on the guy's Amiga, and it got put up in this loft or whatever. And then I guess a year or so ago, he was up there doing something. He found this Amiga, and they went to work. They put it back together. They've made a version to put up on Steam, and it's started selling. This was released as a demo back in the old days on the Amiga called of all things, I love the name of this, Shenandoah, Daughter of the Stars.
Wow.
Yeah. So with a title like that, why'd they change it? But basically the hook is it's an old school shooter, and it looks, if you look at the I haven't played it. It's on Steam. I'll probably end up getting it. It looks just like something from the Amiga. I mean,
is it vertical, horizontal?
It's horizontal.
Okay. Kind of an R-type sort of thing?
Yeah, but it looks... I mean, it's hard to say it looks like an Amiga game, but it looks just like an Amiga game.
The palette and everything.
I don't know if they ported it. I don't know if it's an emulation thing. I don't think it's an emulation thing. I'm holding out and hoping that they actually release an Amiga version of this, since it was developed on the Amiga and he's got the code sitting around. I haven't read anything that says he will, but fingers crossed. But it looks great, and it's up on Steam, and we'll link the article off. So, but it's an interesting article to see what happened with these 4 people. But the game looks good. So, if you're into that sort of thing, give it a shot. Just another little tidbit. We did get a confirmed release date on the Defender of the Crown Extended Collector's Cut. We mentioned last week that it was close to having a confirmed date, and it is, which is it's due out April 20th. So, just a few weeks away. So, he's got about, they have just over 200 left. I would surmise that once the release dates hit, these will go like hotcakes.
Yeah, once people see that they're actually shipping.
And I'm looking at a picture of all the stuff that's in it now, with the postcards and all this. It looks tremendous. And I'm not just saying now, like we're not getting any jack from Cinemaware, but if you're a Cinemaware fan, this is better than the box you would have bought when you did your box. I mean, this thing's got it all. So it's not really that expensive either. I think it's a good deal. I'll probably throw in and get one. But you've got a little time, but I wouldn't hold too long. You're going to lose it. That's pretty much all I've got this month, Bo. It was this month. Like we're doing these monthly this week. It's a pretty light week. But definitely check out that Shenandoah demo. It's available everywhere on the Amiga, and you can kind of get a taste of what's going to be on that Steam game.
Sounds good. This week we've got kind of a mini review of one of the most popular utilities on the Amiga, Deluxe Paint, or D-Paint. And the reason why we're going to talk about it is we have a special guest, Will Williams, who is going to come on and talk to us about his expertise with D-Paint. But it was very highly regarded. It was one of the first killer apps for the Amiga when it was released. When you think about classic computers and their killer apps, Apple II was VisiCalc, the IBM PC was Lotus 123. These are not artistic endeavors. These are not artistic utilities. But the first PC, arguably, that to really try and net artists. The Macintosh maybe, but that little black and white screen probably didn't do a whole lot for a lot of people. The Deluxe Paint really wowed people. I always think about that shot of King Tut's coffin.
The very famous shot. The funny thing, if you look at Deluxe Paint, I think everyone that had an Amiga used D-Paint, or at least saw the fruits of someone else's labor on it. But if you think back, the original Deluxe Paint came out all the way back in November of '85, so not too long after the launch of 1000. I did a little digging because I'm not familiar with the history of this particular utility. I knew of it, obviously. It began as an in-house tool called Prism, and I guess it was from the guys that were from Commodore, and the guys who were developing for the Amiga, and eventually they ended up they basically had EA take it over, and EA released it after that. They released it for 10 years, from 85 to 95. They went through, I think it was all the way up to a D-Paint 5.
Mm-hmm.
They released versions for the Apple II and DOS and the Atari ST, which is kind of neat. From what I was able to tell, D-Paint 4 was the problem child of the 5. It was very buggy and had some issues.
I think they actually had to create a 4.5 maybe to address those. I was telling Bode earlier, we were talking about it, and one of the things I dug up was they used the main character in Monkey Island. His name was basically derived from the save file, one of the save files or one of the storage files out of D-Paint, Mm-hmm.
which I thought was kind of wacky. Here, and just a couple other wacky things that just happened to come up while I was digging. There's I haven't watched this yet, but I got to. There's a music video from 2003 called "Move Your Feet" by the duo Junior Seniors, and it was made entirely with D-Paint, allegedly.
Wow.
And then something I've really got to look into. They used D-Paint for the graphics in the 1989 film Murder on the Moon, starring Brigitte Nielsen. I think this was a BBC movie. Apparently it was released with some fanfare at the time. It was a TV movie, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's also called like Werewolves in Space or Werewolves on the Moon. Is a werewolf connection.
Is there an MST3K
no,
somewhere?
There's not, but there should be. And having Brigitte Nielsen in there seals the deal. So, D-Paint obviously was used in a lot of stuff. It was used in all the games. It was used, it was used in everything, and it was around forever. It deserves some recognition. They did a good job with it. I mean, it wasn't that hard to use. I mean, I used it pretty easily. I wouldn't do anything massive. And when I switched over to the PC, D-Paint gave you enough of a bounce up to where you could jump into the more modern PC stuff when they came out and not be completely lost.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a far cry from using Windows Paint, for example. D-Paint crushed that for years and years, and Microsoft and the PC itself couldn't compete with just the sheer graphical abilities of the Amiga to put anything better out for the longest time.
Right. Well, we've got an interview that we're going to splice in right now with Will Williams, and he's going to talk a little bit more about his Amiga memories and Deluxe Paint. All right, hi everybody. We're back, and we have a special guest this week on the line. We've got Will Williams. And we're going to just talk some Deluxe Paint. So, Will, tell us about, before we get into the actual software talk, tell us about your Amiga experience. What was your first Amiga?
Hi. So I think it was about 1988. I originally come from Perth in Western Australia, and there was a little computer shop, sort of a hole-in-wall computer shop. That was an Amiga dealer, and my brother-in-law, he took me in there one day, and I see FA-18 Interceptor running on an A500, and I think at that point my mind was just blown. I mean, I didn't even know this was possible. I had friends that had C64s and that, but I'd never seen anything like this. So I guess that was my first experience to an Amiga. But it wasn't until I think about 92, 93 that I actually got my first Amiga.
And was it a 500 or 1200?
It was a 500 plus.
Oh,
so
okay.
I had the I think it was Kickstart 204 with 1 mega chip RAM. And so and over the course of years I upgraded that. I stuck an A570 on it and put an extra meg of fast RAM in the slot. So yeah, it was I beefed it up a little bit as I went along.
It's funny that we mentioned many podcasts ago, well, we didn't know anyone that had an Amiga 500 Plus, and they must not have been out much. And now everyone we talked to has had an Amiga 500 Plus. So we were wrong, obviously. They're everywhere.
Yeah, I think it was pretty limited because I grew up in the UK. I went to school in the UK, and it was they were big over there. That with the 600 and the 1200, that was kind of the scene for them.
Now, at this point, do you have a British or Australian accent?
Now it's just I'm kind of a mutt at the minute. It's I've been in the States for about 14 years, so I've got the Australian, the English, and the American all merging together.
So now, were you an artist? I mean, have you always been an artist, and did you buy the Amiga, solely to for artistic purposes?
No, I wasn't. So my first real computer was a Commodore 64. And I only had that for about 8 months until I got an Amiga. And at that point, I just want to play all the latest games. I'm seeing all my mates with these, there's playing Shadow of the Beast and everything. And I just wanted to play some games. And so then I get into the Amiga and I start using it, and I've got access to not really the most legit software. And so I had a good resource of software. And I was seeing all these demos, and I was getting really inspired. I was seeing all these people making all this cool stuff from their homes on the computer that I had. And so at that point, I ended up with a copy of Deluxe Paint, and I started, mimicking a lot of the work that I was seeing out there in the demo scene and in some of the games.
Oh, great. So tell us about, some of your early experiences with Deluxe Paint. What were some of the first things that you created?
So I guess there was one artist that was pretty inspiring. I think it was Eric Schwartz.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I think he did some of the Super Frog. He was the concept artist on that game for
the intro for that too. And he was famous for the squirrel, I believe, among other things. Little animations he did. He's very, very well known.
Yeah. So I was following a lot of his style and using a lot of the animation techniques that he was doing, and that actually then formed part of my portfolio that I went off to get my first gig. And so that was my first real sort of pixel art experience, I guess.
Now, as far as the other, drawing programs, were you, on the C64 or anything like that? Had you used drawing programs before?
I tried. I can't for the life of me remember what it was. I was going back over that today, and I did do something, but it just seemed so crude and rudimentary on the C64. But then just seeing the Amiga, that's just when it finally sort of clicked for me.
Yeah. Now, when you were drawing, did they have, kind of Wacom-like tablets that you draw on, or were you just all drawing with the mouse?
All mouse. I saw those tablets out there, and I used to drool over them in an Amiga format. But yeah, I was never able to afford one of those.
I guess they were probably much more expensive than an equivalent tablet today, weren't they?
Yeah, I think so. And I think they were really specialized. I'm not sure that they worked with all software. I think they came packaged with some art packages.
Oh, okay.
Now, one question I've got, so you say you got your Amiga in somewhere in 92. At that point, Deluxe Paint had been out for quite a while. And I guess I'm wondering if you looked at the PC to see what kind of equivalent art programs were available? Was the PC at that point, had they caught up to the Amiga, or were you just into the Amiga and not even bothering to look at the PC?
I think the PCs that I was seeing at the time, they were running EGA graphics, and so they were pretty crude.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an Amiga, and all my friends had Amigas. I mean, nobody I really knew had PCs at that time. So the Amiga, that was kind of the de facto art machine that I was going to work with for a while.
Cool. Well, how did you take, what you learned from Deluxe Paint and kind of transfer that to what you're doing now?
So I think it was kind of a natural evolution going over to Photoshop. So I think I left the Amiga scene probably 95, 96, and I went straight onto to Windows platform, and I was running Photoshop, and it was kind of an easy transition. I found a lot of the keyboard shortcuts, they were all similar, and the layout, the tool menus, it was all really familiar to me. So I think the Deluxe Paint just gave me that foundation that I could just continue on with, and it's kind of continued with me ever since.
Yeah. Now, are you a graphic artist by trade these days?
I've kind of taken the career path away from graphic design these days. I'm a web developer, so I let somebody else do all that work now. Really,
it's very specialized these days. Everybody kind of has their own role to play in creating. It's so much different than we look at all these games where the same person did the art and the graphics and the music and everything.
Yeah, it's definitely a much more refined set of skills now.
Now, when you were using D-Paint, did you actually, do paid work with that? I mean, as far as design?
No, I didn't. It was in an amateur sort of capacity.
Okay.
I did use it for in a lot of coursework, doing titling sequences and taking the anim format and carrying that over to a PC along with some Vista Pro animations and compiling them on a PC at that point. But it was all amateur, definitely.
Do you remember what version of D-Paint you were using?
I thought it was 4, but looking back, it had to be 3. So I was at that point I was using like a 5-year-old piece of software, and it was still pretty awesome, even in 92, 93.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you were a fan of Eric Schwartz stuff. Did you ever try dipping your toe into pulling that Disney like cartoon making software? I read that he used that quite extensively.
No, I didn't. The animation that I was doing directly in Deluxe Paint. I never had a chance to try the other one out.
Cool. Well, tell us, before we let you go, tell us about your favorite Amiga memory.
It's probably that first time that I saw an Amiga running FA-18 Interceptor. That was that point I didn't think anything like this was possible. And it just amazed me that this was this shop in Perth, Western Australia, this small town, and it had a dedicated dealer of Amigas. I thought that was pretty awesome.
I think for so many of us that, the first time that we see a new piece of technology, almost the promise of the technology and your imagination starts working with, what it could possibly do is almost, sometimes better than what actually happened. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Did you end up getting that game?
I did. That was one of I bought it on budget in about 94, and then recently in the last 6 months I found it again on eBay. I had to get a boxed copy of it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Will. We really appreciate your memories and your expertise with talking about D-Paint, because Aaron used it a little bit. I've never touched it, so we're glad to feature it on our show with somebody that really was down in the trenches with it.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
And we're back. We are done talking about Deluxe Paint, and we are getting started about talking about Rainbow Islands.
Oh yeah.
So Rainbow Islands. This was a Taito. Taito? How do you say it?
I say it both ways. Taito and Taito, whichever way the mood strikes.
Japanese developer, most famous probably for Space Invaders.
Had a ton of good stuff. Arkanoid, Chase HQ, Kix, another great one.
Yeah.
Bubble Bobble.
And it was developed by Graft Gold. So what can you tell us about Graft Gold?
You know, I'd never heard of Graft Gold until I began researching this. They're sort of an interesting outfit. They were a little group that sort of ended up specializing in conversions to a certain degree. They came around in '83 when a guy named Steve Turner decided to concentrate on producing games. They did a lot of stuff for the older systems, the C64 and the like. I think they did some some of the British machines work on those. They worked hand in glove with an outfit called Hewson Consultants, and they were the UK's most successful computer game publishers at the time. The reason I love this, the guy that ran Hewson had his own cassette duplication plant.
Wow.
And so they would be able to make, I guess it'd give them a cost break when they were making the games. And eventually Hewson was bought out in '91 by 21st Century Entertainment, a la the pinball guys. Mm-hmm. We just did. So that's kind of a neat connection there. Anyway, as Hewson Consultants was flopping towards the end of the '80s, the Graft Gold guys moved over to another outfit called Telecom Soft, the software division of British Telecom, which I thought that was amusing.
That is funny.
So, anyway, Graphcom ended up right about now. They started doing your big conversions, and they did Rainbow Islands. Rainbow Islands was probably their biggest title, but due to contractual things, that's why Ocean ended up releasing it, and not the telecom company because of some kind of crazy stuff that was going on with rights and lawyery stuff. Since Rainbow Islands was a hit, Graft Gold got a lot of conversion work, and they did some really good stuff actually that we'll probably have to hit someday. They did a game called Iron Man Stewart's Off Road.
They did. Were they responsible for the port of that?
They did that.
Okay.
They did a game called Flying Shark, which is an arcade. What's an arcade conversion?
Is that real? Did you just make that up?
No, a flying shark. Hey, what's scarier than a flying shark, right? They had a good run, but they ended up changing hands a lot because the '80s was closing up, stuff was drying up. It was getting harder to get anything cooking. They ended up they were owned by Virgin for a while. They were in bed with Activision for a while, and as the 8-bit era ended, that was the end of them. They did a lot of stuff. I kind of looked over their list of the stuff they did, and some of the stuff I was surprised. For our C64 fans, they did Uridium, which was a pretty big game on the C64. They did a game I liked called Alley Cat. I don't know if you remember that. It's another C64 game. Of course, they did Rainbow Islands. They did a game called Bushido, which I remember playing. They did Off-Road for the Game Gear and the Master System. They did a lot of Sega stuff. They did Fire and Ice, which is a game that comes up quite a bit. They did Uridium 2 for the Amiga, which is another popular game. They actually did a version of Rainbow Islands for the PlayStation, if you can believe that, which I thought that was neat. They did another game for the PlayStation. They finally tanked. They tanked after they couldn't get a foothold on the PlayStation. The money dried up. Everybody got laid off. Done deal. Mm-hmm. So, they had a good run. They had a lot of good titles. But this was, I would say, of all the things they did, and they did, that list. There's some pretty good stuff in there. I'd say this is probably their most popular. Certainly on the Amiga, this would have been their most popular title.
Yeah. The game itself is a platform, vertically scrolling platformer. You start at the bottom of a level, you work your way up to the top. Your primary means of transport, besides walking and jumping, is these rainbows that you fire, hence the name Rainbow Islands. There is no explanation as to why you are able, as a small human, to fire rainbows out of yourself. But the game does have an interesting backstory. The game is a sequel to Bubble Bobble.
Yeah, I'm hoping you can explain this to me because I never played Bubble Bobble really either, so I had no idea what was happening.
Well, there's two brothers, Bub and Bob. Bubby, I don't know. I always called him Bub, but he may be called Bubby. That's an odd name, Bubby.
Bub's pretty odd too, isn't it? Hey,
Yeah.
Bub. Maybe his dad was Wolverine.
Maybe so. And they were turned into sort of monster-like creatures in Bubble Bobble by some nefarious means. And at the end of Bubble Bobble, I think there's 99 levels. The game tells you at the beginning how many levels there are when you play the arcade version of Bubble Bobble. When you complete all the levels, you are turned back into humans. But I guess there's still trouble in whatever world these guys, whatever plane of existence they're on. And they have to go back to the islands to save stuff.
Now, were you a good hand at Bubble Bobble?
Bubble Bobble seems like a game that I should have really enjoyed, but I found it very difficult to play.
I'm the same way with both these games. It's like, I don't know why I didn't play them, and I want to like them, but I don't know. Maybe it's just too hard. It's too hard. You don't get it right away.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe
I think it requires a certain amount of time investment that a lot of arcade games, any arcade game requires a certain amount of investment, but to really discover the mechanics, Donkey Kong, you run, you jump, you climb ladders. Those are the mechanics. And now, of course, it's a deep game in other ways. This is a game where there's multiple different ways to play it, and the more time you spend with it, the more you kind of discover how ingenious a lot of the things are. Getting back to so anyway, you got two boys. Now, in Bubble Bobble, one of the main the reasons why the game was so popular is two-player co-op. For whatever reason, they decided to remove that feature in Rainbow Islands. They have two-player option, but it's two players alternating.
I'm assuming it was strictly on the basis of that you just wouldn't work with two people at the same
Yeah,
time.
I guess
You'd have rainbows everywhere.
Yeah, that must be why. But it's kind of a downer because they took one of the most fun things about the first game and just took it out. But anyway, you've got these rainbows. You're firing rainbows. The rainbows serve multiple purposes. You can use rainbows to you fire a rainbow out and you can climb the rainbow. It allows you to kind of get a little bit higher. The rainbow is probably a little bit higher than your character's height, but sometimes that's all you need to be able to reach the next platform. So you can
unless you're me.
That's true. See the live stream for that.
Yes.
But you can actually, you fire a rainbow out, you climb to the top of the rainbow, then you can immediately fire the next rainbow out and climb. So you're kind of making your own stairs and progressing that way. Should you jump, the rainbow that you're on will sink away and kind of disintegrate. But as you jump on it, if you've got an enemy trapped below you, it will crush them, Burger Time style. That's just one way to kill an enemy. You can also kill enemies by firing the rainbow directly at them. However, if an enemy were just to run into a rainbow, it will actually climb over the top of it just as you can. So it's not as if it's a fireball and it will immediately kill it. You have to hit the enemy in certain ways.
It's an odd weapon, like
It
Mr.
is.
Deuce Ball. You just throw it out there and hope something good happens.
Right. Now the levels scroll vertically. You've got kind of a screen, and then when you reach the top, the screen will scroll to another screen. It's pretty smooth scrolling. It's not as if it is I'm trying to think of a good example, but what's a game where you get to the top of the screen, everything freezes, and then you move the screen down?
Yeah, I know what you mean. I can't think of one off the top of my head, and I know there's a million of them.
Just know it's not one of those.
Sort of like what's that Activision game where you're the miner and you have to drop the dynamite and you get on a level and then it's the same kind of thing. Help me out here, Bode.
Hero?
Activision Hero. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Now the game is pretty generous with collectibles. There are
Zool-like.
Yeah, there are 80 different types.
Oh, God, there's that many.
There are that many.
Holy
now.
smokes!
Unlike Zool, where things just nothing about Zool makes sense, including the
His name.
myriad items that you collect. There are the green pepper is the item that's worth the least amount of points. It's worth 10. The money bag is worth 10,000 points.
Did you ever see that?
I never saw the money bag. And the way that it works is each bonus object you collect produces the next bonus object in the sequence.
Huh.
So eventually, you're going to wrap around after you've destroyed 80 things or caused 80 of these collectibles to appear. If you don't grab that money bag, the next thing you're going to hit is the green pepper. So it's rough.
So getting the money bags, just like real life.
Just like real life. Now, you can collect the items by walking over them, or you can hit them with the rainbow. So you kind of have a projectile, that kind of a boomerang sort of thing, where you can collect them that way. And the objects stay on the screen for a good amount of time before they disappear. The music is one of the more unfortunate things about Rainbow Islands.
Well, I mean, it's close to the arcade. I mean,
well, it's one of the more unfortunate things about the arcade version of Rainbow Islands. It is a sort of reworked to avoid copyright issues version of Over the Rainbow.
It's more like Under the Bane Row.
Right. And this thing loops and loops and loops. And the first time you hear it, it's not bad, but it just grates on you after a while. Now, I've heard, thanks to the stunning review posted by Dreamcatcher, that when you get to a boss, the music does change. However, when you're of the skill level that the Amigos represent, we do not see the boss. So
you know what would have been nice is if they'd put a Lemmings here. Lemmings has many, many levels and many, many tunes.
Right.
So even if you get a tune that you think stinks, there's another tune coming, and it might not be as bad or it might be good.
Right.
This, again, I don't blame them. It's a conversion. They're like, well, this is what played perpetually in the arcade, driving people insane. Maybe that's part of the difficulty level.
Now, what the Game Boy Color version of this did was they just took the whole song out and they used the music from Bubble Bobble.
Is the music from Bubble Bobble better, in your opinion?
I can't remember it right offhand.
I'm just saying.
It might be.
If you can't remember right offhand, it's probably not that good either.
No. Now, this was ported. Oh, we forgot to say when this came out. This was released in '92 on the Amiga, I believe. Is that right?
In 1990.
1990. Yeah. Okay.
And it was 80. It was released in the arcade 87.
87.
So pretty close.
Yeah. This is this game was ported to almost everything. It came out on the Mega Drive, the TurboGrafx 16, the PC Engine,
Amstrad.
Any Archimedes love?
I didn't see the Archimedes. So I've got all the ones you mentioned. Plus, here's the the Towns Marty.
The Towns Marty. Wow.
We got to get us one of those, Bo. We got an extra couple grand.
Yeah.
The TurboGrafx, the Color Game Boy, the NES, the PC, Sega Master System, Mega Drive, Saturn. I love Saturn and PlayStation. PlayStation 2.
Wow.
I'm guessing that was a virtual arcade download.
Well, it had to have been part
and
of
of course
compilation.
the good old Specky got it. So a lot of systems that's got this thing. It's just a sidebar, but back in the old days when I was getting in emulators on the PC, there was an emulator. I believe it was called Rainbow Island emulator, but it emulated all this era of Tato stuff.
Really?
Yeah, and it was sort of the big deal before MAME picked up all the picked all those arcade ROMs up.
I hadn't thought about that in a long time. The old, back when they were emulators. Yeah, standalone emulators.
Yeah, I mean, like there was one for all the Capcom games called Callus. I remember that when that came out, it was a big deal. And they were a lot harder to set up back in those days.
I had the Pac-Man emulator.
Yeah. I remember when I was very, very young, I saw a Game Boy emulator on a BBS, and I was baffled. I had no idea what an emulator was. But so someone loved Rainbow Islands enough to name their emulator after, and I'm assuming that's why they started emulating the ROMs in the first place, was to play Rainbow Islands.
Right. So how did you do on this one, Aaron?
Hideously. You saw my score during the live stream. I think it was like 23,750. Not good.
Well, I managed to top 70,000 on the live stream, which beat my previous record, so I was pretty happy about that. What kind of eBay actions this thing got?
There's good. Well, I mean, if you're much like most of our stuff, if you're in the UK, you're laughing. There's been one sold in the US recently. It sold for $24 shipped.
Was that a complete copy?
That's in a box.
Okay.
In Europe, in the UK, you're looking at $22 shipped. That's with the box, $22 US. I saw many copies that were just the disc for $10. I saw a lot of compilations that included this on there. So Your mileage may vary, but it can be had for a decent price. Now, did you see this thing where there's a third one of these Parasol Stars?
I have seen Parasol Stars just looking through MAME.
Do you know what that is? Have you ever played it?
No. We may need to look at that a little later on.
I read that this was this may have been a budget title, or maybe it was just eventually a budget title, because I read that it was that Ocean had. I guess maybe they released it after, like secondly under the. I guess Ocean has a distributed a publisher called the Hit Squad that they use to. I guess so after it gets greatest hit status. I did notice that. So and this thing, like I said, it was very popular. It reviewed very high. Magazines anywhere from, I think the lowest I saw was like somewhere in the high 70s all the way up to the 97%. One magazine, I think it was Amiga Action, I think it was, said this was the best Amiga game of all time for several years running.
It's high praise.
And several others had it ranked in the top 30. So the game, and I played the arcade game before I tried it on the Amiga. I'd not played this on the Amiga, and I had just a cup of coffee with the arcade game. Good translation. I mean, I felt about the same. Of course, it's up to jump, but in this game, it works okay. I mean, I know that's a pet peeve of yours.
Yeah, but I don't mind it on games like this for some reason. It's really the scrolling platformers like Turrican and stuff.
I thought it was an interesting game. I stink at it. It's one of those games we were talking during the live stream. It's a game where I may have to sit down with it for a while and learn to get into it. I could see it being your type of game, but one thing I did read was the Amiga version lacked 2 of the levels that you would get in the arcade, which I believe adds up to 12 levels of gameplay. So that's kind of a bummer. And I also read, I don't know what this means. I guess at the end of these levels there's some sort of progression of the storyline, but they said these levels were had progression of the storyline. I mean, since they were gone, you didn't see that chunk of the game.
Well, it's funny because you actually don't find out that Bub and Bob are the guys from Bubble Bobble until almost the end of the game.
Really?
Yeah. So they didn't advertise that on the cabinet or anything.
Well, you think wasn't it called something the sequel to Bubble Bobble? I thought that was like in the title somewhere.
I don't think so. I think it's just called Rainbow Islands. Yeah.
It's neat that there's this doesn't seem like a game that would have a story, but
it does.
But it's Japanese, and this thing is Japanese as hell.
Yeah.
To be fair, the guys are little big-eyed guys, and they run amok. So, it's colorful. Me and my kid played it. He hated it. So he liked it at first because it was pretty, but then once he started to play it, he said, I don't like it. So, of course, he's 6, folks. But overall, I'm not going to say anything bad about it because it's a good version for an arcade game. They did a good quality job. If you're into the arcade machine version, absolutely give it a shot.
Awesome. Well, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Will Williams, Zach Zimmerman, O'Brien's Retro and Vintage, Chad Halstead, and Brent Dowdy.
Thanks, guys.
And if I left you off, I feel like there might be one more sponsor, but I accidentally deleted all the names last time. But we'll get you back on there.
Well done, bud.
Next week.
Those are the guys that make angry, too. We love you all.
And but anyway, if you'd like to sponsor the Amigos and help keep us going, you can visit our page at patreon.com/AmigosPodcast.
One more thing before we leave for the week. Please, and Boat referenced it earlier, go check out Dreamcatch's art blog on this. It's outstanding. He did a really good job getting into the nooks and crannies of the game. So he always does good work. If you get over to our webpage or our Google Plus page or our Facebook page, check his stuff out. It's always top shelf.
Yeah, and also I released the very first video of me playing an actual game on the Amiga 500.
Yes.
So it's super hang-on. I've got some cameras mounted on the Amiga so you can see the disk access light. I've got a camera on me. I've got a camera on the screen. There's cameras everywhere.
It's beautiful, man.
So check that out. If you want to see more real Amiga videos, let me know. And next week, we are going to tackle that classic puzzle platformer, Gods.
Yes, this should be interesting. I haven't played this one for a while, but I seem to think it was a very unique title.
So until then,
adios.